So my name is Jesse J. Holland. I am the author of Black Panther, Who is the Black Panther? The first novel written about Black Panther. I am also the editor and a contributor to Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, which is the first prose anthology written about the Black Panther in the world of Wakanda. I am also author of Star Wars The Force Awakens, Finn's Story, which was the first novel written about the character Finn in Star Wars The Force Awakens. I'm also the author of Superman Red and Blue #2 story Deadline, becoming one of the first Black men to actually write Superman for DC Comics. I'm also a historian, and I wrote the books Black Men Built the Capitol, Discovering African American History in and around Washington, D.C., and The Invisibles, the untold story of African American slaves in the White House. Coming up next year, I am the editor and a contributor to the anthology Captain America, The Shield of Sam Wilson, which will come out in conjunction with Captain America, Brave New World. And I'm also a journalist, a professor, and a sometime host of C-SPAN's Washington Journal, and a regular guest on History's Greatest Mysteries with Lawrence Fishburne.
Great, thank you so much for that. My first question for you is, how does it feel that the Black Panther book was nominated for NAACP Image Award?
That is one of the hugest honors of my life. After I wrote Black Panther, Who is the Black Panther? Marvel came back to me and asked me what I wanted to do next. And one of the things that I have always loved doing is not only writing, but exposing people to new great Black authors. So instead of doing a novel by myself, I went to Marvel and said, hey, let's get some of the great Black fiction writers out there to write their own version of Black Panther. And they agreed to it. And I went to a bunch of great writers like Cadwell Turnbull, like Tananarive Due, like Cherie Renee Thomas, like Maurice Broaddus and Milton Davis, and asked them to write the best Black Panther or Wakanda story they could. And on top of all of that, I got to edit the very first piece of fiction that was ever written by the fabulous poet Nikki Giovanni for Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. So to get acknowledgement for that work, just to see that work on the shelves is just incredible. It's one of the highlights of my life.
Okay. My next question for you is, what gave you the idea to write Invincibles, The Invincibles?
So one of the things that has been a through line in my writing career is my love of African American history. So wherever I go around the country, I want to know the Black history of that place. Well, I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2000, and one of the first things I did was take a tour of the National Mall. And while they do a great job of talking about Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln, there's really no mention of the contributions of African Americans to the National Mall or to Washington, D.C. And I knew there had to be Black history there. And if no one else was going to tell it, I said, I'll do it myself. So I wrote a book called Black Men Built the Capitol, Discovering African American History in and around Washington, D.C. And that book explores the African American history of the National Mall and areas around Washington, D.C. While writing that book, I discovered not only were African American slaves used to build the U.S. Capitol, they were also used to build the White House. In addition to being used as the construction crew in the White House, the first presidents used African American slaves as the domestic workers inside the White House. They were the cooks, they were the maids, they were the butlers. But no one ever talked about these people, who they were, where they came from, or what happened to them after their president left the White House. And just like I did with Black Men Built the Capitol, I said, if no one else is going to write this, I'll do it myself. And that ended up becoming The Invisibles, the untold story of African American slaves in the White House. It actually started out as my thesis for my Master of Fine Arts degree. After I graduated graduate school, I took that thesis and rewrote it into a book. And it's been one of the greatest achievements of my life is getting that book completed and out on the shelf. In fact, that book was name checked by Machelle Obama at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia when she was the first person at the White House to say, "I live in a house built by slaves."
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
I was actually on the floor for that convention when she said that, and it was a huge milestone. No president has ever verbally acknowledged that they live in a house built by slaves. At least Machelle Obama has said it. That justifies all the work that other historians and I have put in bringing that history to life.
That's amazing. Since you were there in that moment, what was that feeling like for you, just the hear that come from her mouth?
I had no idea she was going to say it. And in fact, I think my back may have been to the stage when she said it. But as soon as I heard it, I went, yes, she said it. And it was one of those really weird stories. I was actually working for the Associated Press at that time, and I was covering the convention. And when she said, "I live in a house built by slaves," I got excited, and my phone starts ringing. And a reporter from the New York Times calls me and said, "Machelle Obama just name-checked your work at the convention." And so I do a quick interview with the New York Times about Machelle Obama saying this. And then I go on with my day. I'm like, yeah. And then the next morning, my boss at the Associated Press brings a copy of the New York Times to me and says, "You let the New York Times scoop you on the story you should be writing for us?" And I was like, oh my goodness, I did, didn't I? And so I really had to turn around and start writing that story for the Associated Press. I was so excited in the moment to have my work acknowledged by someone from the White House. They've done a great job in the Capitol of acknowledging the slaves that were used there. In fact, the largest room in the Capitol right now is called Emancipation Hall to honor those slaves. They've never done anything at the White House. So just having Machelle Obama say that, it just blew my mind.
That's such an amazing story. Switching gears a little bit, when you wrote Star Wars The Force Awakens, the first story, how much leeway were you given to come up with a good story?
Very little at all. Actually, I met the editor of Lucasfilm Books when I was working in New York, covering Hillary Clinton's first Senate campaign. She and I had a mutual friend, and we just become friends. And I always jokingly say, "Hey, if there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I can do anything." And we laugh, we have a drink, and we keep moving. So years later, I'm married, and my wife has a convention in San Francisco. And I remember this friend has now moved to San Francisco, and I call her and say, "Hey, I'll be in San Francisco. Let's have lunch." And once again, we have lunch. I say, "What do you do now? When you were in New York, you were editor of a small publishing house. What do you do now?" She's like, "Oh, I'm the editor of Lucasfilm Publishing." Like, wow, exciting. We laugh. I say, "Remember, I said, if there's ever anything you need, I'm here." And we laugh, we have lunch, and we keep moving. So a few years later, I'm actually speaking at LSU in Baton Rouge. And I'm staying in the LSU Alumni House. And my phone rings at 10 o'clock at night, and it's this editor. And she says, "Well, I don't know if you know, we have this new movie coming out called Star Wars The Force Awakens. And there's a character in the movie that we need someone to write a quick background on. You remember you said that if it was ever anything I needed, you were there. I need someone to work on this. And will you do it?" And I'm like, "Of course." She's like, "Well, there's a catch. It's got to be done in 3 months. You have 3 months to turn this around. Can you do it in 3 months?" Well, unbeknownst to her, no matter how much time it took, how little time she gave me, I was going to say yes. So I say, of course, yes. And so I'm actually in the middle of covering the first Trump-Clinton election. And I'm working at the University of Arkansas. I live in DC, so I'm commuting to Fayetteville, Arkansas every week, back and forth. So I'm covering Clinton, Trump, I'm commuting and teaching in Arkansas, and I'm also trying to write this book at the same time. And I had to turn it around in 3 months. That's when I lost my hair, but I actually did get it done. I got it done, and it became Star Wars: The Force Awakens Finn story. It was put out with the first background for the character Rey, the first background for Finn, and the first background for Poe Dameron. They came out as a set. So I got to play around in the Star Wars universe, and it was absolutely awesome.
That's amazing. This would be my last question. So we just left the Being a BLERD panel, and we were in a room, a very large room, surrounded by a bunch of Black nerds, a bunch of BLERDs, a bunch of people from all walks of life within our community. What is that moment like for you being up on the dais and being able to provide your insight and your experience and seeing in the crowd nothing but other Black nerds?
Well, I can tell you in the years I've been going to not only comic book conventions, but literary festivals, Star Trek conventions, Star Wars conventions, there have not in the past always been many people there who look like me. Not only have there been few people who look like me, there have been even fewer Black women in the crowd. There definitely were not any cosplayers. But if we look around conventions like Dragon Con today, not only are we seen and present, we are part of the whole experience.
And for those of us who don't live in Atlanta, I'm out of DC. Well, that's the home of BLERD Con. And you go to conventions like this, you will always find some of us somewhere, most likely at the bar. You'll find people like me and Sanford Green. We gravitate to each other at these conventions. So
for those of us who have been in these realms for years, it is incredible. But it's also on us to ensure that we are welcoming people who come after us. It's not on us to gatekeep and say, this is what a BLERD is, and this is what a BLERD is not. Our job is to bring in others behind us, to make those crowds even larger, to make us even more appreciated in these worlds of animation, movies, television, books, and comic books. It's our job to bring in more people, not say, this is who you have to be, or this is who you don't have to be.
Right.
So it's always great to see people on stage who are willing to open the door for people behind them, not kick away the ladder. So being on a panel like that, it's always great to hear how people are collaborating with each other, setting up groups that encourage other people to say out loud, yes, I love comic books. Yes, I love anime. Yes, I play RPGs. Yes, I'm a cartoon guy. It's great to see people willing to say that out loud, but not only willing to say it, willing to bring along those who come after us. Be able to bring along our children, our grandchildren, our friends, our neighbors' friends, and be able to say, yes, we belong. This is who we are and where we should be.
Perfect. Final question. I would love to have your take on the question I asked in the panel.
Right.
The question was, why do you think, just you personally, we as African Americans gravitate towards more towards Japanese culture than our own African culture and heritage?
And I will say again, what I said on the panel is I disagree with the premise of the question because I think we are following what's available to us. If there was an option of more African mythology out there for us to consume in anime, I think it would be supported. Right now, the only thing available is American style or Asian style. As we move forward, as we become more part of these groups, as we move into more animation, into more television, into more movies, you'll see more of that material out there. I know plenty of writers who are working on getting that material and making it available. So I wouldn't say African consumers prefer it. I will say African consumers consume it because it's there. As more African mythology gets out there, as more Native American mythology gets out there, as more African American mythology gets out there, I believe we'll support that too. But right now, we're consuming and we're enjoying what's out there. As we get more Black creatives to write anime, as we get more studios to hire more African American cartoonists, as we get more companies out there like Milestone, and more movie studios like Tyler Perry Studios, we'll see more of that material start bubbling up. But it's like saying, why do African Americans enjoy television shows that don't have African Americans in them? Well, because it's all that's out there. As we get more African Americans into these communities, as we get more African Americans into anime, as we get more African Americans into literature, into television shows, into movies, we'll support them. That was the big, that was the big shock, which I don't know why it was a shock, to Marvel Studios about the success of Black Panther. Was because before that, the axiom in movies was African Americans won't support an African American led superhero movie. Look at what happened with Meteor Man. Look at what happened with Steel. People won't support that. Well, no, if it's good, everyone will support it. It has to be good. It can't just be Black. It has to be good. Same way with Jordan Peele's Get Out. Black people won't follow Black horror. Look, did Candyman make any money? Did Tales from the Hood make any money? Well, if you give audience good stories with good characters that feel realistic, they'll support it. Not just Black audience, any audience will support a good story with believable characters. So as anime matures, because keep in mind, anime's only been around on American shores for maybe about 20 years or so, in a major way. As anime matures, we'll get more and different stories. And maybe we'll get stories with African mythology that not only African Americans will enjoy, but everyone will enjoy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, for giving us this time. Thank you for coming on. Is there any lasting words you'd like to say?
All I need to say is that coming out in January is Captain America, The Shield of Sam Wilson, an anthology, the first anthology featuring Sam Wilson as Captain America. It'll be released at the same time as Captain America, Brave New World. Everyone go out to see the movie and then come out and read the book.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.